We begin Unit 2 with probability. So our first unit, 2.1, begins with the idea of what is probability, and then we'll go through some examples of that. So in this lesson, we're going to learn how to evaluate how likely an event is to occur or not occur. And that's what a probability measures. It's a number, and it measures how likely a random event will occur. And when you think about events or things happening, there are different outcomes that can occur. So we start off with this situation of if you flip a coin, what are the two events? What are the outcomes? Sorry, the event of flipping a coin has two outcomes, heads or tails. And so that's what we list there as the possible outcomes. You roll a die, a standard die, one die. You can get a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Here's an example of a spinner. Spinning that spinner is an event. An outcome would be either landing on red, blue, or green. And so that's what we're talking about. And so using this as our first example, determine the fraction of the spinner that is blue. And so you'd see 2 out of 5. Those are 5 equally cut parts. And so how do you turn that into a decimal? I'll just go ahead and divide, get a calculator, and do 2 divided by 5. And you get 0.40 or 40%. If you want to quickly look at another way to do that, there's another way if you wanted to do that 2/5. You may remember 2/5 is the same as 4/10. They're equivalent fractions, and so that's where you get your 40%. That's another way to think about it. Looking at another example here, certain card games use multiple decks. If you play with cards, you're playing a game with 364 decks, and 25 are spades, which is one of the types of cards. How many cards? And so we have to kind of revisit taking percents. And so you do 25% of 364, or you do 1/4 of 364. Remember, 25% and 1/4 are the same. And so you multiply either way, and you'll get 91. That's how many cards there would be. And so we're starting to build this idea of what is probability, and we have to do some of these calculations to get that. And sometimes we talk about it in terms of percents, and we'll do some calculations around that. Let's take a look at one more that kind of gets into this idea of probability. So think about this. If you and your friends decide to flip a coin to see which team will go first, you and your friends have played this game many times before. You observe that tails has come up only twice in the last 10 flips. So let's say you flip a coin 10 times and only 2 comes up. I would say that would be unusual, because if you flip a coin 10 times, you would expect 4 or 5 or 6 of those to be heads when flipping the coin. So if only 2 come up, you would say that's probably unusual. And so what we're talking about here is this idea of probability. And all probability is, right, it's a mathematical description of uncertainty. It's the likelihood that something will occur. So you have these questions here, right? And there's probabilities attached to each of these types of questions here. And so one thing that we want to make sure we examine here is when we think about probability, right, values of probability of an event, what are the values, right, that we say? What we learn is that a probability, when you say what's the probability of something happening, there are multiple ways to record this. And so sometimes you just say that as a percent, 50% chance, 20% chance. Or if you say what's the probability, someone might say 0.5. And so probability is really a number between 0 and 1. And so sometimes you say it as the decimal, or sometimes you say it as the percent. You even could say it as a fraction too, if you can convert the decimal to a fraction. And what are some words we use for if the probability is 0? We would say it's impossible. If the probability is 1 or 100% of something happening, you say certain. If it's in the middle, a 50-50 chance or equal chance, you would say if something has a 50% chance. So we use that language. Those are the words we use to describe the numbers instead of numbers. And so just thinking of subjectively kind of thinking about this here. Well, let's go there. Let me end the video. We'll start from there.